Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Bowl Predictions brought to you by us at Inside Nebraska. He is Greg Smith. He is Steve Mark. He is Jeff Ekstrom. I'm Zach Carpenter. And today, boys, we're talking about a homecoming game, another night game at Memorial Stadium. Last one didn't go as well for the Huskers, but we all predicted it might with the loss to the 45-42 loss to Georgia Southern. But it's round two, right, Greg? They get another shot at cashing in under the lights.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a special thing. And I know Mickey Joseph has been asked a couple of times this week about being able to play a night game at Memorial Stadium and what that's like. So yeah, being able to kind of cash in on that is a big deal. We'll get, Thunderstruck 2.0 will be back this week between the third and the fourth quarter. And this is the first time I've ever thought about that ahead of the game. It always surprises me. So yeah, it'll be a good weekend.
Yeah, I wasn't ready because I wasn't aware of the light show and everything in the third and fourth quarter. Like I didn't know it was going to be like that. And it's something I had been pulling for them to do at Ohio State for 3 years. And then I'm like, oh, I got my wish. So should be an electric atmosphere though, right, Steve? I'm sure it could make a difference.
Yeah, and I'm expecting a close game. So I think, at the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth, just to get the juices pumping again. I always think that the other team gets into it just as much as the Huskers do. So yeah, and I'm expecting a close game. So it'll be interesting to see how both teams react in the fourth quarter after that show. It's always something interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it always is kind of an interesting wrinkle when there's an electric crowd like that. And it's like, yeah, it gets the home team fired up and the players fired up, but there's an opposite side of that coin too, where, all right, we know this is a big deal, big environment. It's not going to be a sleepwalking type of game where it's played in front of like 30,000, 40,000 fans in front of an empty stadium. But Jeff, you're the one who talked about before the Georgia Southern game, the sort of the environment we could be seeing. So you'll be there too with covering the game with us. What are your thoughts on just the setup of this game?
It's interesting. It's obviously a night homecoming game. I mean, going into that Georgia Southern game, Nebraska was 48-9, I believe, at all time Memorial Stadium night games. And obviously they lost this one. So I think it's a different dynamic because I feel like it's a little awkward. You have a program who's reeling 1-3, and then they resume after a bye week at a night game. So I'm interested to see what kind of response that gets from the team because it's just a little weird timing. I don't know if it's just me, but it just seems a little weird timing with home game after a bye with the program at 1-3.
Yeah, a little weird environment with a lot of things going on with the changes at the top, national coaching search going on in the background, but we could wind up seeing one of the better atmospheres that we'll see all year at Memorial Stadium. A bunch of former players coming back for homecoming and setting up nicely, at least going into the game. So Greg, without further ado, you're in the tee box now, leading us off. What's your first bold prediction for this matchup against Indiana?
All right. Well, I feel the pressure being the leadoff hitter here. I'm going to go with Travis Vokolek will have at least 6 catches in this game. And once again, I've picked that number for a very specific reason because 6 is the amount that he has on the season right now, which is kind of odd to say. But if you think about it, it makes sense. He had 5 early in that game against Northwestern over in Ireland. He looked great to kick off the season before getting injured. He missed the next 2 games. And then last week he only had 1. And I think Steve was the one that mentioned this to me that like, hey, he only had 1 catch in that game. And I was kind of surprised because he thought with him coming back, that they would target him a little bit more. Game kind of gets away from him and all of that. We saw how it went. But I think that this week he'll be a lot closer to 100%. It was something that it kind of went under the radar, I thought, throughout the week. I don't think that was brought up a whole lot. And listen, it's not like there's not, any number of storylines to dive into, right? But it didn't come up a lot. And I think that Travis getting back to 100% this week will be a huge security blanket for Casey Thompson. And I see him getting at least 6 catches this week.
Yeah, it feels like we talked about Vokolek's health every week except for this week, and he finally might be back to full 100% health. it's interesting dynamic. Steve, what do you got for your first one?
Yeah, so I'm kind of going with the Indiana angle here, and Indiana is going to rack up 5 sacks on Nebraska. And that just kind of stems from the upheaval, the kind of bad situation that is Nebraska's offensive line right now. So we know that left tackle Teddy Prohaska is out for the season with an injury. We know that Kevin Williams Jr., who's kind of a utility lineman, he can play tackle and guard. He's out for at least 3 weeks with a high ankle sprain, probably even more. If anybody, watches sports, you probably heard about high ankle sprains and how they're notorious for kind of taking a very long time to heal. So yeah, I mean, the offensive line at Nebraska is not very good right now. And just doing a little research on Indiana, they've got, I know Zach, you know him well, Dasan McCullough, a true freshman, 6'5", 230-pound edge, coming off, screaming off the edge. He's had a heck of a debut, a start to his career. He's the highest rated recruit in Indiana football history, comes from a good family, a good coaching background. His dad was a Kansas City Chiefs running backs coach, and he's at Notre Dame now, if I'm correct. And then, just Dasan McCullough, he can get after the quarterback. Cam Jones is a really impressive 5th-year middle linebacker who had a heck of a debut this season against Illinois, which is a really hard-fought win for Indiana. But man, those two guys can really get after the quarterback. And just watching some of Indiana's games, what they do up front with slants and twists and just a whole bunch of movement things to try to confuse Nebraska offensive lines. As we've seen this season, Nebraska just does not handle that well when there's just a lot of movement in front of them. Mark Whipple, the Nebraska offensive coordinator, has said on Tuesday that a lot of those sacks that Nebraska gave up against Oklahoma came from communication errors. And so we'll see what that looks like. I'm not optimistic that things are going to go well. So for my one bold prediction, Indiana is going to rack up 5 sacks on Nebraska on Saturday.
And we're seeing a common theme with Steve each week, boys. Every time he does his film reviews, he falls in love with one player from the opposing team. I think it was the North Dakota receiver.
I
Georgia
love
Garrett
it. I love it.
Garrett Stagg, who was the Georgia Southern receiver. I can't remember.
Oh, it was the big kid, right? Wasn't he really big?
For a week.
Jeremy Singleton, transfer from Houston. Yeah, there you go.
So then we've got Cam Jones, the linebacker.
And Dasan McCullough. Don't forget about Dasan.
Yeah, Dasan, like you said, know him pretty well. He was committed to Ohio State for about 8 months. Covered him very extensively on the recruiting trail. Good kid, talented kid. He wound up flipping to Indiana once his dad took over as Indiana's running backs coach and associate head coach. His younger brother committed there in the 23 class. His older brother transferred from Miami, Ohio to Indiana. So all those 3 things lining up. I've never seen a flip from Ohio State or any other program that was just universally. I didn't see one person in the Twitter streets or the message board communities saying like, oh, that like what a terrible decision. It was like universal. Oh, yep, we get it. Like that makes sense. It's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Of course, now his dad's over at Notre Dame, but Dasan's a really good talent. He's the one player on Indiana's roster who I'm looking forward to the most of watching, just because background of knowing him pretty well. But you talk about the offensive line being in shambles, and I'll get into that. But with Kevin Williams, the high ankle sprain, Mickey Joseph was asked about it, and then he said that twice he said, yeah, Kevin just had surgery for it. And I thought for a second, I was just hearing things, or like maybe I was just thinking back to him talking about AJ Allen. I'm like, did he say surgery? Like, I think I just misheard him, but high ankle sprain surgery is not a common thing you hear, right?
No, it's not something that you usually hear. Like, and that doesn't scream 2 to 3 weeks to you, but we'll see. I guess stranger things have happened. I guess advances in medicine. We'll see how that goes.
Should we start getting to the intricacies? I'm going to set up Jeff for to tell us about the intricacies of modern medicine and in
Sorry,
athletics.
Jeff.
But Jeff, after all that discussion, what is your first bold prediction here?
Well, I think I'm going to go with Indiana's offense in the quarterback Connor Bazelak, if I'm saying that correctly. Transfer from Missouri, and Steve, you did a nice job with your breakdown with showing how strong of an arm he has. But he's been pretty inconsistent this year. 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and Indiana's going to air out the ball on Saturday. Nebraska's struggled to stop the passing game a little bit this year, and I think that's going to be a struggle again. But I think with how inconsistent Bazelak has been, I think Nebraska grabs a couple of interceptions, at least 2 interceptions on Saturday. With his strong arm, that means Indiana's going to be confident in taking shots downfield. And I think the best part of that secondary for Nebraska this year has been Marcus Buford and Miles Farmer. Buford coming off a couple games ago had 2 interceptions. So I think Nebraska is situated down deep downfield, and I think Indiana's going to take a couple shots, and I think it's going to result in a couple of interceptions for the Huskers.
Yeah, Jeff. So my second bold prediction I was going to talk about was along your same line. So I'm going to go 2 for 1. I'm going to say both of my bold predictions here before I let you guys finish it out, and then we get the final scores, because I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking they get at least 1, if not 2 turnovers, and I'm also predicting an interception. I think Buford's a prime candidate to get that, because I was looking it up earlier, the Big Ten stats and just around college football nationally. And Nebraska has only forced 5 turnovers this season, which is 11th in the Big Ten. They're 12th in the Big Ten with a -2, -2 turnover margin. But when you're sort of dissecting those turnovers, other than the fumble force against Oklahoma in garbage time in the 3rd quarter, the other 4 have all been game-changing, momentum-shifting plays. Like, Nebraska has been giving up a ton of yards, and they've been giving up a ton of points. 35.5 per game is, again, last in the Big Ten. So again, it's one of the worst defensive numbers in the conference. But when they've had those opportunities, when they've taken advantage of those turnover opportunities, they become huge. I mean, the Marcus Buford's forced fumble against Cam Porter against Northwestern, it was 21-17. That led directly to a 28-17 lead. Garrett Nelson's strip sack against North Dakota was 14-7. That led to a 17-7 lead. And then Buford, again, he's a common name around here. He had both of his interceptions changed the landscape of that game. With the first half interception, it's a 14-14 tie. That interception leads to a touchdown, 21-14. And then his second interception in the 4th quarter, it looked like that was shaping up to be a potential season-defining play, as him and Nelson teamed up for that, with Nelson putting the pressure on, and I believe getting a hand on the ball, and Buford snagging that at the 2-yard line, because that set up a 15-play, 98-yard drive for that Casey Thompson engineered. And it's like, to go up 42-38 against Georgia Southern, and that looked like it was going to be okay. That's a season-defining turnover. And I just, again, Indiana's passing offense, I think, is going to go off in this game. I think Connor Bazelak, I think is how you pronounce his name. I have him, for my other bold prediction, I have him throwing for a career high, Hoosier career high in passing yards. This is his 5th game since transferring from Mizzou. At Mizzou, he threw for 406 yards. That's his career high. He put that number up against LSU in a win in 2020. And for the Hoosiers, he's thrown, outside of the Idaho game where he threw 29 passes, he's thrown 52, 55, and 66 pass attempts against Illinois, Western Kentucky, and Cincinnati for 330 yards, 364, and then 280 against Cincinnati last week. So they're going to air it out. They're an air raid offense. Maybe they try to balance it out, knowing that they're going up against a very vulnerable Nebraska running defense. But even if they do try to balance it out, I still think they're going to go with that, with their identity of passing it up, and against, again, a vulnerable Nebraska secondary, which position group on this defense isn't vulnerable right now. So I think he throws for he'll hit the his Indiana career high over 364 passing yards. I don't know. I have him climbing toward that 400 total, but I have him passing for that Indiana career high in a loss, and I'll get to that in a second when we go through our final score predictions. But Greg, get me to stop talking here and go with your second bowl prediction.
It's funny. Whenever I try to go through these, I'm thinking in my mind, like, what would be like something that kind of seems improbable that you just wouldn't believe happened? And it actually, you guys really teed me up perfectly for this without even knowing, because everybody's talking about how, Indiana's going to throw it so much. And of course, that means Nebraska's going to have a real opportunity to get a couple off of Indiana and get a couple of turnovers. I'm going to predict that Nebraska does not, in fact, get any interceptions as my bold prediction, or my second bold
That's
prediction.
not that bold. Come on, man.
No. It's bold if you think somebody's
interception they have this year.
No, if you think somebody's going to throw it 55, 60 times, you would think in theory that's not that great of a quarterback there. He's fine. That you would end up, sorry, they're going to put that on the bulletin board. You would think that the opposing defense would get, one or two picks. I don't think they're going to get one. I think that it's just such an interesting thing, and we'll get to this more too when I get into my final score prediction, is that it's just hard at this point to predict like really good things for Nebraska. Like, it makes sense in a lot of ways, but then it just turns out to not be so, right? And so I think sticking with that theme, I'm going to say, I'm with you. I think they're going to throw it at least 50 times, but I don't think Nebraska's getting an interception in this game.
That analysis actually, and now I get it. Now you would get the full point for the correct prediction there, I think, for the boldness of
that works.
Explanation. Yeah, I'm glad you said that at the end, because each one of these bold predictions videos, maybe the exception of Oklahoma, we've all sort of been for the most part saying positive predictions about Nebraska, and then I think the analysis, the explanations, they make sense, and then it just goes to be the exact opposite of what we think. Just like when we talked for like 20 minutes about how the rain was going to affect the Georgia Southern game, and then it didn't rain at all. And then we didn't talk about the weather at all for another game. Now I can't remember. And then it started raining. I think it was the Oklahoma game. Is that it? When it started, it was raining before.
It was sprinkling in the pregame.
Yeah. All the games are running together. There's been so much going on the last month. It's felt like 5 years. So excuse me for getting the games mixed up. But Steve, what's your weather-related bold prediction?
No weather-related bold prediction today, guys, but because I went with a kind of Indiana-centered bold prediction my first time around, for my second, I'm going to go with the Nebraska offense. And because I think Casey Thompson probably has a really good shot, just looking at Indiana's defense and how kind of leaky it is. They aren't very good. They screw up a lot back there, Indiana's pass defense. So I think there's an opportunity for Casey Thompson to have a big game. But for that to happen, he needs to stay upright and the offensive line needs to block for him. But again, that's not my bold prediction. My bold prediction is Marcus Washington is going to have a Husker career high 8 catches for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. He's going to catch his first touchdown as a Husker against Indiana. And I choose Marcus Washington because if I was Indiana's defensive coordinator, if I was Indiana, I would try to take away Nebraska's most dangerous threat at receiver, and that's Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer has almost 30 catches on the season already. He's by far the top, Casey Thompson's top target in the pass game. So I'm trying to bracket Trey Palmer, put 2 guys on him, try to take him out of the game plan, let somebody else beat you. And I think Marcus Washington will be that guy. And I think Marcus Washington's going to have a nice game. 8 catches for 100 receiving yards, and he's going to catch his first Husker touchdown.
I might be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the first Marcus Washington centered bold prediction we've had, unless Steve,
it is.
We made one before. It's not like the time when we all three, I think, had something where Trey Palmer was going to catch 1 billion yards and have 8 touchdowns or whatever it was for, I think it was the North Dakota game.
It was probably North Dakota. Yeah.
So we're switching it up. Marcus Washington, big day. Jeff, who's having the big or not big day in your next bold prediction?
Well, I'll stick with the wide receivers, but I'll go on Indiana and saying someone has a big day, and that's going to be Cam Camper. junior college transfer from Trinity Valley Community College in Texas. Already has 33 passes, 418 yards, but most of that came from 2 games were against Cincinnati and then trying to look here, Steve, you might know, but regardless, 2 of the games combined for 250 yards. So he can pop off for a lot of yards and a lot of catches. And I think he does that with the passing attack Indiana has on Saturday, at least 8 catches for 100 yards. And I'm not going to be surprised if he goes over that. Big body too. So I think he matches up well in the secondary.
So we got 2 cams that Steve loves, Jones and Camper.
Yeah, there are a lot of cams going around these days.
He's pumping his fists like, I'm glad.
Well, I pump my fist because like I'm watching these Indiana games and it's just like Cam Camper. He's throwing a Cam Camper again. And I look the guy up. He's a junior college. He's in his first year at Indiana. He comes from Trinity Valley, like Jeff said. And I keep thinking to myself, like, I mean, Nebraska had a chance at, a JUCO wide receiver, a highly touted JUCO wide receiver, and he can't get on the field and stay on the field. And then Indiana gets one and he's catching 10 passes a game and is awesome for them. So I don't know. I love Jeff's pick. I like Cam Camper. Like he said, he's a big body wide receiver. He's going to get a ton of targets. It's going to be really fun to watch whoever lines up across him, whether that's Quentin Newsome, Tommy Hill, Brandon Moore from the transfer from UCF. I don't know who's going to play the other corner. That's kind of the state of Nebraska's defense now, but yeah, Cam Camper, excellent pick, Jeff. Good job.
Everybody clap at Jeff for the pick. We're all simultaneously happy. Cam Camper, that's also a hell of a college football name, isn't it?
It's an excellent name.
Great name.
For a football receiver. Well, Cam Camper, their passing attack, like we all I think agree, is going to get some action. And for our final score predictions to start us off, I've got Nebraska 38, Indiana 31. Like I said before, I think Indiana's offense is going to move the ball against Nebraska's defense. I don't see an avenue for Nebraska's much maligned defense to keep them off the scoreboard or keep them from moving the ball. They haven't been producing enough sacks or pressures to make a difference consistently throughout games. So even though I do think that Indiana's offense is going to be very successful, I come back to the turnovers prediction, which is it's such a variable. Turnovers force is such a high variance, so it's maybe a risky, I guess, prediction, but that's why we call this bold predictions. Risky prediction to bet on a big time turnover to making the difference, but that's what I've got in store with a 38-31 final score prediction. And right now, as we're talking today, the spread is Nebraska minus 5.5. After opening as 3.5 point favorites on Sunday, they're 5.5 right now as we record this on Thursday afternoon with a point total of 60.5. And like I said, I try to keep it on the predictions on sort of a similar line to that. So I would have Nebraska covering by 1.5 and the over hitting by what is that 69 points, so 8.5 if I'm trying to do the math correctly. So Greg, you got Nebraska covering, got the over hitting. What do we got here?
I do have the over hitting because I have Indiana 42, Nebraska 24. I feel like I've been teetering on picking a couple of these like bad Nebraska losses before, and then something just always says, no, this will be the time that they kind of bow up and it's okay. I think that unfortunately, to me, the dam may be about to break for the program. And this is not like, I don't think that that's really a hot take. I think that given the fragile state of what's going on and what is kind of at play here, like I think that on one hand, I really like the things that we've heard this week from Mickey Joseph, from Bill Bush, even some of the stuff from Mark Whipple as well, but especially the stuff from Bush about kind of simplifying things for the defense and being able to allow guys to get set so that they can play faster and they can be in position. But I don't think that this matchup is good for Nebraska at this point. I think that we've been talking about kind of the issues that Nebraska has had both in the secondary. I don't think that we've brought up the pass rush one time yet so far, but I'll bring it up now, is that it kind of goes together, right? Nebraska's had a lot of problems getting after quarterbacks and really affecting the quarterback. And if you've got a team that is going to throw it 50 times in this game, and Nebraska is not able to produce many sacks, if any, I think that spells trouble for Nebraska's pass defense. I can see a big number going up on the board for Indiana. I don't love the combination of Nebraska trying to then slow the ball down on the other side either, because I just think that offensive line is not built to do that. We'll see. So I've got Indiana 42, Nebraska 24, but hammer the overs on the game if you're so inclined.
Yeah, and a couple things is, number one, we talked all off season throughout fall camp of everything the coaches and players are saying sounds great. It's positive. It's pretty easy to buy preseason hype and optimism, and it's kind of the same way when a new coaching staff sort of takes over, new defense coordinator, new head coach. So hear what you're saying on that. And then with the pass rush, I mentioned it for like 2 seconds a little bit ago that they have not gotten enough consistent pressure. But they have in these tiny spurts, like at the beginning of the Oklahoma game, the very first drive against Northwestern, then that completely got wiped out. And then, like I said, the Nelson strip sack, and then Nelson affecting that Buford pick. But hasn't been consistent enough. Again, I'm banking on them, the pass rush showing up for at least couple, 2 or 3 plays to help force a couple, 1 or 2 game-changing turnovers, like I had alluded to. And like you said, the pass rush and secondary, like the coaches, like I think Travis Fisher was the first one I noticed say it, talk about it at length during fall camp of, they have to work in tandem. And I mean, that's an obvious thing. Doesn't matter which coach said it, that's just an obvious thing. But I think the pass rush that was supposed to be much, much better than it has been hasn't shown up enough. And we'll see how that affects Saturday's game. And we'll see. Steve, do you think that's be an effect on the game? What's your final score prediction?
Yeah, so final score, this is the first time that I'm picking Nebraska to lose, 38-34 Indiana. This is the game that Nebraska's defense just needs to show something, right? Just needs to show life. The past 2 games, they have not gotten stops. One of them against Georgia Southern, the other against Oklahoma. Indiana's going to come in here. Everybody's going to think that they're going to throw the ball. Walt Bell, former UMass head coach. I'm sure Mark Whipple and Walt Bell are going to have some UMass stories to share before the game. But yeah, they're going to throw the ball. But if they're sending out 4 wide receiver sets, they're going to spread the field. They're going to create a light box, and then it's going to be Sean Shivers, the Auburn transfer, right up the gut. And it might be just Georgia Southern all over again. It might. And again, we all like Bill Busch. I think we can all safely say that Bill Busch is a good dude, and he knows football really well. But at the end of the day, how much impact is he going to have? How much change is he going to have? I mean, probably not, in my opinion. It's still going to be the same guys out there, we think. And those same faces just have not gotten it done. And I just think Indiana is going to move the ball. They might run it better than they have. They're second to last in the Big Ten conference with rushing yards per game and yards per carry. They're right next to Iowa, and you never want to be next to Iowa in an offensive stat at all, but they're there. And I'm just kind of curious. Remember last year when Purdue came here and everybody was talking about the passing offense, but Purdue had the best rushing game of their entire season against Nebraska. It's like, of course they did. I'm thinking like maybe along the same lines with Indiana. They're going to come in here with a high flying 50+ pass per game offense, and then maybe just, end up getting 150 on the ground or something like that. So 38-34 Nebraska. This is the game that Nebraska's defense needs to show up, show some life, and just show up, really.
And it sounds like you don't necessarily expect that to happen. And I don't think any of us would be surprised if they get gutted on the ground again. Like I was saying, I think maybe like you come in with this Indiana hyped passing offense, and then we see all this stuff on film where we can really exploit Nebraska's rushing offense, rushing defense, just like everyone else has. But I also I've said this in the past, or over the past couple weeks ago, I think it was after the Georgia Southern game, where it looks like, I think if for the avenues for Nebraska to win are to win in shootouts. And I think that's going to remain true for this game and probably going forward. So Jeff, you wrap us up with a final score prediction.
Yeah, so I have 35-31 Indiana, because truth be told, I'm not going to pick Nebraska until they prove they can win. I mean, until things may be different now because the close losses, that more has to do with coaching. And now I think this game will be close. So I think we're going to see what kind of impact Mickey Joseph has in those close game situations. We all know that Frost wasn't good in those. Now let's see if Mickey can be good in those. And I think, just a thought about the defense. I don't know how much impact Bill Busch is going to have, because you got to remember, it's not like Coach Eric Shenander was bad. I mean, he led a top 30 defense last year. And if he had a couple more seasons like that, like he did a year ago, he was going to be in talks to be a head coach. So I think a lot of that has to do with the personnel, and that really isn't going to change. And if new guys come in, they're young and inexperienced. So I think it more has to do with the personnel standpoint than scheme. And so I still think they're going to struggle. And again, like I said, this team hasn't proven they can win. Until they do, I'm picking the opposition. Give me Indiana.
Yeah, I think we had talked about that coming in, of the questions of young, inexperienced players. With the talent is there, but the experience is not. So I think that's been showing up throughout, and the missed gap assignments, bad angles, pursuit angles to the ball, the missed tackling issues. I think I can't remember the number offhand, so I don't want to give it and have gotten it wrong, but the missed tackles number is just kind of staggering through 4 games. That's probably going to continue to be an issue because, like we have talked about numerous times, those issues are fixed during the offseason, not in season. So we'll see. Everybody here right now for their final score predictions are all 2-2. We all predicted Nebraska over Northwestern, Nebraska over North Dakota, Nebraska over Georgia Southern, Oklahoma over Nebraska. So we're all 2-2 right now. So this is the breaking point. I got 3 against 1. I'm the only one picking Nebraska. So one or the rest of you is about to go under 500 for the season so far. So it's a united front against the Inside Nebraska publisher, but I'm ready. I'm standing my ground. We're gonna have a 38-31 Nebraska win. I'm actually not even firmly standing my ground. I already wrote up the content for our
already waffling.
I'm not waffling. I'm locking it in. Boom, it's keyed up. It's in there.
Okay.
You're reminding me of, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but Jon Snow, when he gets tossed off the horse in the final season, and the army of horses is just bearing down on him, and he just pulls out his sword, and he's just one guy against 1,000 horses. That's you right now, Zach.
Well, for our watchers and listeners, Game of Thrones spoiler alert. Give you a couple seconds to pause, skip forward or whatever before I say
Sorry,
it.
viewers.
Yeah. Jon Snow was killed and came back to life. So you guys are all trying to kill me, and I'm coming back to life with this prediction this weekend. But no, for our Saturday story, I already wrote the write-up for the final score prediction. And I said bluntly, I could see this score being flipped, and it's Indiana 38, Nebraska 31. When you put a prediction on the back of turnovers being a major turnovers force being a big factor in that, you have to kind of just be forthright with, this is on a flimsy ground, but hey, it's a prediction. That's what we're here for. So
you put it out there.
Yeah, I'm just letting the people know that it's not my most confident pick, but it's out there. All of our predictions are out there. So we will find out who's right, who's wrong. If any of us are right, any of us is wrong. On Saturday, kickoff is at 6:30 p.m. for the homecoming game against Indiana from Memorial Stadium. We'll all 4 be there to provide coverage, and keep it locked into nebraska.rivals.com and the Inside Nebraska YouTube page. And we'll keep it moving. So for Greg Smith, for Steve Marek, for Jeff Ekstrom, I'm Zach Carpenter, and we'll catch you guys the next time.